Hi everyone, my name is Mark Zellefrow and I'm a board certified behavior analyst with Oakland University's Center for Autism Outreach Services. And in this week's video, I'm going to be talking to you about using punishment without punishing your child. So, a fun topic to talk about, some interesting things that we can look at, and maybe talk about punishment not necessarily in the traditional sense or in the, I guess, maybe stereotypical sense that you might think, but kind of looking at it from an ABA perspective and kind of from some of the principles or strategies that we might use. So let's dive in and look at some punishment procedures that we can use that are very effective and that, again, we can incorporate with some other strategies that we've talked about in previous videos. So, looking at punishment procedures, first I want to just give a little disclaimer per sort of our ethics guideline and ethics code that we adhere to as behavior analysts, and just say that we always should recommend a reinforcement procedure rather than a punishment procedure when possible. If a punishment procedure is necessary, we should always include a reinforcement procedure sort of in conjunction with that intervention and behavior change program. And before implementing any punishment-based procedures, you should always, again, ensure that you have the appropriate training and oversight, and again, that it's a multi-component sort of intervention we're looking at. So we should never just jump straight to punishment. Make sure we include that reinforcement component. We've tried various reinforcement components first, and if those don't work, then again, we would move to a punishment-based intervention, but still incorporate some reinforcement aspects to that intervention. So, disclaimer out of the way, and moving on to what is punishment. So simply, punishment is just a consequence of a behavior, and it aims to decrease the future frequency of a behavior. Just like with reinforcement, we have positive punishment and negative punishment. So when we're looking at positive punishment, we're just simply talking about sort of adding a stimulus or adding an action immediately following a behavior that results in the decrease of the future frequency or likelihood of that behavior occurring. So if we were to look at you touching a hot stove, for example, again, maybe you're a young child, or maybe you haven't been around stoves or know necessarily what they do, and you reach up and you touch the top of the stove when it's on and it burns you. So, and then you pull your hand away really quick and you never touch the stove again when it's red or when it's hot. So again, you sort of have that behavior of touching the stove, that hot burner burns your fingers, and you pull your hands away and never touch that stove again. So that behavior, the addition of the burn, and then the future decrease of a behavior. So that's an example of positive punishment, and we'll also talk about some formal procedures here in a minute. But when looking at negative punishment, that is simply, again, just a process that occurs immediately followed by the removal or decrease in the intensity of a stimulus that decreases the future frequency or likelihood of that behavior occurring. So let's say, for example, you're in school and you don't do your homework. So your teacher takes away recess time and makes you stay inside to complete your homework that you didn't do. So in the future, magically you do your homework every single time and it's always done and looks great, and homework is done to completion. So you don't do your homework and that's your behavior. The teacher takes away recess time, and again, that's that loss or removal of something. And then in the future, you always do your homework. So again, looking at like a negative punishment example. And again, in a minute, we'll talk about some kind of formal procedures that we can look at as well. So positive is adding something, negative is removing something. So looking at some positive punishment procedures that we can use. Again, I've used a variety of these in the past. You probably have used them or had them, I guess, used on you. And again, punishment isn't always a bad thing. Again, remember, simply it's just a consequence after behavior that decreases the future likelihood that that behavior will occur. So the least intrusive positive punishment procedure that we can use are just simply reprimands. So again, saying no or stop or like that's enough. Again, to get rid of that behavior or again make it decrease. I know that's one that we've all used or had used on us at one point or another in life. And ideally, that's where, again, we want to be, that least intrusive procedure. Again, just a simple verbal reprimand. Again, please stop. Don't do that. I don't like that. Things like that. Again, a simple reprimand. You kind of learn and have that sort of self-identification that, oh, that's not what I'm supposed to do. That's not okay. I've been given this feedback that this is not okay, so I don't do that again in the future. So just simple reprimand. Again, it doesn't have to be done with a harsh tone of voice or a bad tone of voice. It certainly can, but it doesn't always have to be. The next kind of, I guess, positive punishment procedure that we're looking at that's moving to a little more intrusive is overcorrection. So we have two types of overcorrection procedures that we can look at. The first one is positive practice overcorrection. So this one, again, you probably used or had used on you at one point or another, is when you are required to repeatedly practice the correct form of a behavior. So let's say you went to, I guess, throw away a paper towel, for example. And instead of throwing away the paper towel, it lands on the floor and mom or dad catch you and they say, throw that away. So then they make you pick up that original paper towel that you dropped and throw that one away. And then they make you repeat it multiple times. So then maybe they would come and pull it out of the trash can and make you pick it up again. And again, practice that positive or correct way of doing it. Or maybe they would say, okay, throw away the paper towel. And then they would put, again, another piece of trash or paper towel or something on the floor for you to pick up and do that positive practice of the correct way to do something. Again, it could be something like folding clothes or putting away like dishes or laundry or something. If you don't do it right the first time, then you're going to have to do it multiple times in a row correctly before you can be done and move on. So that's positive practice. Another form of overcorrection is restitutional overcorrection. And this is, again, just another similar procedure where you are required to sort of repair the environment back to its original form and make it better than it was prior to the behavior happening. So let's say, for example, you purposefully spill something. So I have my water and I don't want to be at dinner anymore, so I just pour my water out all over the table. In restitutional overcorrection, you would have to clean up the water that you spilled, but then you might also have to clean off the table and clean the table up, clean the floor, mop the floor, and again, maybe clean the entire dining room. So you repaired the environment back to its original state by cleaning up the water, but then you had to make it even better than it was before by cleaning the table, cleaning the floor. Again, maybe you're cleaning the chairs. So two types of overcorrection procedures that, again, both are very effective. And again, I'm sure that we've all had them used on us at one time or another. And we kind of learn, okay, it's better to do the appropriate thing the first time, or I'm going to have to do it multiple times over again, or do it over again and do additional work on top of that. So again, overcorrection is another procedure that is very effective. Again, it's not harmful in any way, and again, is also used pretty commonly. Looking at the next, I guess, sort of intrusive form of positive punishment would be response blocking. And this is when we're physically intervening to block a response from occurring. So again, maybe if we're looking at a person that has self-injurious behavior, that maybe, again, they head hit. Maybe response blocking would look sort of in the form of us putting our hand here, so they're hitting our hand and they're not able to make contact with their head. That could also be, again, maybe they are aggressing towards you, and again, maybe it's punching or kicking or trying to pull your hair, and you're just using safe means to block that individual from being able to, again, come towards you or cause harm to you. Another form of response blocking that we can look at is just sort of changing the environment in order to prevent the completion sort of that response, if you will. So if somebody is, say, throwing toys, for example, they're throwing toys at you or throwing pencils or markers or other, again, it could be furniture, who knows. But maybe when you see that beginning to happen, you immediately clear the room of all those items so they're no longer there to be able to be thrown. So again, you're sort of blocking or preventing that response from occurring. And again, you're sort of removing those things so that cannot happen. So those are three, again, sort of positive punishment-based procedures that we can look at. And let's flip over to negative punishment procedures quickly. So looking at some negative punishment procedures, one is response cost. And we've talked previously about token economies, and I'll use that as an example. But response cost simply looks at the loss of reinforcement contingent on a behavior. So it could be, again, an individual is earning tokens on their token board, but if they exhibit this target behavior that we're looking to reduce, maybe they lose a token. Or maybe if you have, again, it's assumed that you're going to be going to recess that day and you, again, don't do your homework, then recess is taken away. And you're not allowed to go outside because you didn't do your homework. So you're losing that recess. It could also be if maybe someone is earning a weekly allowance and, again, either they don't complete something that they're supposed to do, like certain chores, or they engage in a particular behavior. Maybe money is taken away from their allowance. And again, they're losing part of that reinforcement, or it's costing them part of that reinforcement. So a response cost, again, can also be very effective. There always has to be, again, that reinforcement component built in, and they must have access to the reinforcer in order for some to be taken away. So whether it's physically given, like a token economy, and then removed upon contingent occurrence of that behavior, or it's an assumed access to reinforcer. So every day I know at noon I get to go to recess, but today that's being, again, taken away because I engaged in a particular behavior or didn't complete a particular task that I was supposed to. So response cost is there. Again, that always has a reinforcement component built in. The next one, looking at some negative punishment procedures, is timeout. So again, we have two types of timeout. We have the non-exclusionary timeout, which looks at sort of the contingency on inappropriate behavior. And we have things like ignored planning. So if you engage in this particular behavior, we're going to remove sort of all social reinforcers, and we're going to ignore, again, that behavior that's occurring, or ignore the person engaging in that behavior and sort of shift our attention to somebody engaging in the appropriate behavior. So non-exclusionary timeout with some planned ignoring. We could also have some non-exclusionary timeout with the withdrawal of reinforcer. So if, again, a particular behavior occurs that we're looking to decrease, we would take away a specific reinforcer for a certain period of time. So again, when that behavior happens, I know I'm going to lose. It could be the iPad or the PlayStation or my favorite doll or whatever the case may be. So we're withdrawing that reinforcer. And lastly, with non-exclusionary timeout, we're looking at contingent observation. And again, I know this is one that has been used a lot, or probably used on you as well. But if you engage in a particular behavior, then you're going to be sort of excluded from the group and forced to sit out and watch. So if you push down your little sister, or push your little sister down the slide, then you have to go sit on the bench while all the other kids play. And you have to, again, sit there and watch and aren't allowed to play for a certain period of time. So those are a couple examples for our non-exclusionary timeout. And then looking at exclusionary timeout, again, contingent on that inappropriate behavior. Maybe a person is placed sort of behind a partition or sectioned off to another part of the room or environment. So when you engage in that behavior, you have to go over there and sit behind the screen or behind the desk, or again, somewhere that is divided and kind of away from everybody, but still within that same room. And then the other part of exclusionary timeout looks at moving to a different environment. And again, kind of that most restrictive procedure, if you will, where when you engage in that behavior, you're removed and you have to go to your bedroom, or you have to go out to the hallway, or go to the calm down room. So again, you can sort of see also with these timeout procedures, moving from a least restrictive with non-exclusionary timeout and just some ignoring, all the way down to exclusionary timeout and moving to a different environment. So again, those are just some examples of a handful of different punishment procedures. Again, both positive punishment procedures where, again, we might be adding something, again, to the environment and looking at, again, maybe just some of those reprimands or an overcorrection procedure or response blocking, or looking at some negative punishment procedures where it might be a response cost or a timeout procedure. Again, all can be very effective. All have probably been used on us at one time or another in our life. But remember, we should always have that reinforcement component to it. We should always try reinforcement before moving to some of those punishment procedures. But if we do use one, again, always in conjunction with reinforcement, and fade it as quickly as possible, and teaching those new appropriate behaviors so we can, again, remove that punishment-based procedure and, again, get back to some of those reinforcement-based strategies and other interventions along those lines. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video, and I will be back with you guys next week talking about a new topic. So until then, take care.